1 Timothy chapter number 5. Getting kind of close toward the end of the book of 1 Timothy, and we can see that Paul is kind of wrapping up some of his thoughts and kind of putting in some things that it's almost like, oh, I should probably add this before I end this letter. And it's kind of like what we're seeing in this passage this morning. I enjoy driving. There's something about it. Ever since I got my license, my first car was an 2000 Oldsmobile Intrigue, dual camshaft. That thing drove like a tank, and I loved that thing. It had heated seats. It had a 12 CD disc changer in the back. Now we don't even need that anymore, apparently. But I just really loved that car. I loved driving. And this was back in Washington State, where I was from. And they have these things over there in Washington State. We don't see them as much over here. But they're not called road bumps. They're called road humps. Think about a road bump, but slightly bigger. It is exactly what it is. And there's this particular road that I was driving down, and you know sometimes when they make these road bumps or road humps, they make them blend in with the road sometimes. And you know, if you don't stop in front of these road bumps, it's a bit of a bumpy ride, if you know what I mean. And so I remember once or twice that I was driving down the road and I didn't see the road hump or road bump, and all of a sudden, clunk, 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 you hit it, and it comes out of nowhere. And you wonder if you still have an axle or not. Sometimes we can be going through life, we can be driving along, and it's all fine. But then all of a sudden, we hit that road bump. Sometimes it's not a road bump. Sometimes it's a bit bigger than that. Sometimes it's a road hump. And we kind of get shocked by the trials or whatever may come in our lives. This is when suffering strikes. Sometimes it comes out of nowhere. And sometimes it's bigger than we could even imagine. Chapter 5, Paul is really talking to Timothy about a particular type of suffering that many in the church have faced. He addressed the widows in the church, the people that had lost a spouse. He goes through some of the parameters of what the church's response should be to that, how they care for the widows in the church, how to honor widows. But I think we can also kind of gather from this thought, overall, what do we as a church do when suffering strikes? Or what do we do as a Christian when suffering strikes? When these things occur in our lives that we never even imagined could happen. So we're going to read through verses 1 through 16, but we're not gonna focus on the whole thing. We're gonna kind of take some verses out of there and focus on those. But 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 1, we'll just read through this. Do not sharply rebuke an older man, but rather appeal to him as a father, to the younger man as brothers, the older women as mothers, and the younger women as sisters, in all purity. Honor widows who are widows indeed. But if any widow has children or grandchildren, they must first learn to practice piety in regard to their own family, and to make some return to their parents. For this is acceptable in the sight of God. Now she who is a widow indeed, and who has been left alone, has fixed her hope on God, and continues in entreaties and prayers day and night. But she who gives herself to wanton pleasure is dead even while she lives. Prescribe these things as well, so that they might be above reproach. But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he is denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. A widow is to be put on the list only if she is not less than 60 years old, having been the wife of one man. having a reputation for good works, and if she has brought up children, if she has shown hospitality to strangers, if she has washed the saints' feet, if she has assisted those in distress, if she has devoted herself in every good work. But refuse to put younger widows on the list. For when they feel sensual desires in disregard of Christ, they want to get married, thus incurring condemnation because they have set aside their previous pledge. At the time that they learn to be idle, as they go around from house to house, and not merely idle, but also gossips and busybodies, talking about things that are not proper to mention. Therefore, I want younger widows to get married, bear children, keep the house, and give the enemy no occasion for reproach. In verse 15. For some have already turned aside to follow Satan. If any widow who is a believer has dependent widows, she must assist them, and the church must not be burdened, so that they may assist those who are widows indeed. The question to us this morning is, do we take on the responsibility of caring for those around us, or do we expect someone else to step in? Do we expect the church to handle it? But when we really think about it, we think about, the church will handle it. Who is the church? We are the church. We are all the church. If you are a believer, you are part of the church. So we'll look at kind of what the church's response to suffering should be. We are going to observe just 3 different aspects of suffering that we can begin to respond to it. So first, we'll look at verse number 4. As I said, we're just going to kind of grab a few verses out of this passage and just focus on those. But if any widow has children or grandchildren, they must first learn to practice piety to their own family, and make some return to their parents, for this is acceptable in the sight of God. So first, we're going to see suffering with family. Now, I kind of like this verse in the sense that it's talking about, as a parent, you bring the children into the world, and you raise them up, you protect them, you feed them, and so the words that Paul uses is to make some return to their parents. It's only reasonable that children and grandchildren should take care of their parents, their grandparents, because parents have sacrificed so much for them. It's important to realize that family, and this is something that even in Bible college I learned, family is your primary ministry. It's interesting that when Paul broaches this topic, this is the very first thing that he covers. He says, look, the very first thing, the family should be taking care of them. The children should be taking care of them of all their needs. And so there's 2 things that we see from this as well. God honors widows, and so should we. I just want to point something out that I thought was really cool, I guess would be the word. I used to be a youth pastor, so I guess I could say awesome. Right. It was pretty cool. There's this verse. There's a word in this verse in verse 4 when it talks about how the children and grandchildren must practice piety. The Greek word that is used there is only used twice in the New Testament. The only other time that it's used is when Paul is addressing the Athenians in Acts 17, when they had this altar to the unknown God, and they were practicing piety to that. They were worshiping that. So I just want to point out that it's interesting that the word is used because it shows the level of honor that is due. It shows the level of honor that God gives toward widows, toward those that are suffering in the church. The second thing is that, as I mentioned, the children and grandchildren should be the first to step in. I don't know if your parents ever told you this before. They would use this line that maybe went something like this: I brought you into this world, and I can take you out of it, right? It's kind of the same concept here. They brought you into the world, they raised you up, so it's only reasonable that they take care of you when you need it the most. Paul stated in verse number 8, it's no coincidence that Paul said this in verse 8, but if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. We have to be very careful because some churches or pastors, people will tell you that you ought to leave your family and serve the church. I want to be the first to tell you that that is not right. God puts the family at a high regard. And for many of us, we have family that aren't believers. So it's only reasonable that we make our family our primary ministry. If we disregard our family and only work toward maybe serving the church or serving God, and we put all our time toward that, well, then we've lost our family. It's important to have a balance. It's important to recognize that we shouldn't abandon our families. We must do our best to be there when our families need us the most. Let me tell you, especially if we have family members that aren't believers, if we are there for our family, you know how much that shows Christ to them? You know how much that's a light to that family member? That we are there for them in a time of need. We also see in this passage a picture of the church in action. A person has their biological family, but we can't ignore the fact that we have a church family as well. Right? We're all children of God. We're all brothers and sisters in Christ. And so we are called to bear one another's burdens. When suffering strikes someone in the family of God, it's our job to uphold that person, to carry their burdens, to help them through it. And I realize that when I say the words like the church, that can have many different meanings, right? We have the local church, which would be an assembly of the bigger church. The church is anyone that has believed on Jesus. The church is really big, right? But then we have a church like Casco Alliance Church or any other church. Those are local assemblies of the church, local representations of the church. And so that kind of changes our perspective when we begin to realize whose responsibility it is to take care of those that are suffering. Now, we as a local assembly, we do organize certain things to help those that are suffering. But we have to be careful not to allow that to kind of discount our own responsibility. To take action if someone we see is suffering, if someone we see is needing help. Isn't it easy to hear about someone who is suffering and think, well, someone else will take care of them? I think about the story of the Good Samaritan, right? Prime example. A person got robbed and beat up and was on the side of the road. People passed by him that really should have helped him. They were priests. But then the Good Samaritan showed up. Someone that really wasn't associated with Jews, and he helped them. We have to take action. And by the way, I'm delighted that the people of Casco Alliance Church do practice this. What I encourage is that we continue to do that. Continue to help those that are in need when suffering strikes. Let's continue verses 5 and 6. It says this, "Now she who is a widow indeed, and who has been left alone, has fixed her hope on God, and continues in entreaties and prayers night and day. But she who gives herself to wanton pleasure is dead even while she lives." So secondly, we're going to look at suffering with hope. See, there are two different paths that we can really take in response to suffering. One path is the path toward hope. Another path is a path toward a broken hope. I love the way that this passage is written. It says she has fixed her hope on God. It's a fixed hope. It's not something that's moving. It's not something that is that's wavering. It's a hope that is fixed solely on God. And by the way, God is unmoving. He is unwavering. He's unchanging. We sang that song, Same God. He's the same God that he was back then, and he will continue to be. We can hope in our unchanging God. When it feels like everything else in life is falling apart, when things are out of control, there is one person that will uphold us, that will sustain us. He is unwavering and he is unchanging. His name is Jesus. I love what the writer of Hebrews says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. We have to learn not to focus on our current suffering. And we have to fix our eyes on Jesus. I found this article. I don't necessarily know who it was that wrote it, but her name is Kimberly Aaron. I just really love the way that it kind of illustrated this topic of hope. It says this, "We see this world unsettled, shaken, upheaved and unanchored. Many upon a boat with no course and hope, no land in sight. There is chaos on board, many captains, but many among them know not each other or the boat on which they sail, adrift upon it. They know not where they are upon this raging sea or which way is best. Who will captain this ship? Yet, one small light, who is unseen or heard by all in this unsettlement, with many trying to be captains, do they all turn one by one toward this seemingly one insignificant and small light in the middle of the ship. He is calm, at peace with God. They do not know. He is not one that looks in and that they would notice him, but the peace and the light surrounding him amidst all the yelling and chaos. Does he stay calm and at peace? His light is overwhelming. They all stop and look and try to find a reasoning for the attention others are now showing toward him. All unsettlement and commotion start to reside as all draw close to him. They know not why they are drawing near, but the force and the power of his peace is too overwhelming to deny. All gather around this peace in desperation that would block out the chaos that is happening. His hope is intoxicating. the light invoking, his peace overwhelming. They become like a moth to a flame toward him. All this chaos starts to calm, and the seas that seem out of control are not in their focus. The seas are lowered to them, though they continue to rage, but their eyes are on the light and the peace surrounding him. The ship starts to quiet, and now that which seemed out of control seems to have settled and found its peace around this one. Who is this one? He is Jesus. He is light. He is the peace that can quiet our storms. Amidst all our anxieties and fears, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He is God. He is good. Let him be our captain and our guide in the midst of our storms. Let us be anchored and secured to a secure and well-captained ship. He is God. That's the hope that we can fix our eyes on. The seas may not calm. It may still be chaotic, but we have a peace that we can fix our eyes on. We see the opposite end of the spectrum, a broken hope, in verse 6. The other response to suffering, becoming a widow in this case, someone that gives wanton pleasure, someone that turns to the ways of the world, the pleasures of the world. Let me tell you, this path only brings destruction and unrest. It's interesting that this is a statistic that I found. I know that they say that 59.95% of statistics are made on the spot, but that was a joke. It's okay. 29% of U.S. adults who identify as ex-Christians say personal suffering or the suffering of others cause them to question or leave their faith. Now, I bring this up to point out that there are two different ways you can really go. When suffering strikes, when things happen in our lives, are we going to run toward Jesus or are we going to run away? It's a decision that we are faced with when something happens in our lives. We have to fix our hope on Jesus. Now, Paul, kind of toward the end of this, our text here, he goes into a little more detail about when it comes to widows that are younger. And so that's kind of the context of this part of the passage here. In verse 13 says this, "At the same time they learn to be idle, as they go around from house to house, not merely idle, but also gossips and busybodies, talking about things that are not proper to mention. Therefore, I want younger widows to get married, bear children, keep house, and give the enemy no occasion for reproach." So we see suffering actively. Now, I want to point out that this whole thing about being busybodies and gossips, really, that could be anybody, right? Any of us, if we don't stay busy, if we don't stay active, there are things that we might fill our time with otherwise. There are two other responses to suffering that we can see. We see idleness, and we see busyness. We'll see what that means. Isn't it true that sometimes when a time of suffering or tribulation happens in our lives, some of us will react by just shutting down. Don't want to do anything, don't want to go out of the house. We just shut down. We go into idleness. Another thing my mother would say, idle hands are the devil's workshop. Oh, so your mother said it too. Okay. I wasn't the only one. And it's such a true point, though. and this is even in the context of without a suffering, if we become idle, if we don't fill our time with things that are profitable, things that are productive, we will tend to fill our time with other things that aren't so good, aren't so productive. The opposite end is busyness. Some of us, when suffering strikes, when we have something happen in our lives, we make ourselves so busy to try and distract ourselves from the suffering. And by the way, both of these responses are not healthy. Because what we can do is we can push it off, and we don't have that time to grieve or deal with these things, our emotions, or the things that we need to deal with. 2 Thessalonians 3:11 says this, "For we hear that some among you are leading undisciplined life, doing no work at all, but acting like busybodies." Now, one thing I learned pretty early on when I was a teenager joining the workforce is that if you seem like you're busy at work, people will think that you work really hard. Yeah, Peter likes that one. And it's something that, and obviously I can still do a lot of work, but if you act like you're busy, people will say, man, you just work so hard. And that's kind of what I see when I think about busybody. You're doing a lot, but you're spinning your tires. You're not doing anything to move forward. You're just seeming really busy. I think we have to be careful when suffering strikes in our lives that we don't fall into that category, that we make ourselves so busy to ignore what we're actually dealing with. It's like what we mentioned before about bearing one another's burdens. Well, one other thing that God tells us to do is to bring our burdens and set them at His feet. Because the reality is, I imagine when Jesus looks at our lives, He sees the burdens that we carry that we don't have to carry. We sang 2 songs this morning that spoke about victory, how we have victory in Jesus. And isn't it silly that sometimes we carry all these burdens on our back, even though the victory is already won? All we have to do is give it to Jesus and fix our eyes on Him.